there. Everybody who's listening to the Sara Carter Show right now is probably wondering what the heck is going on in America. I'm wondering what's going on in America. But before we begin this show, I want to let you know we are sponsored today by AMAC. That's AMAC. That's the Association of Mature American Citizens, the only conservative alternative, folks, to AARP. Join the movement today at amac.us/Carter. Great organization. Before we begin the show today, I want to talk to you a little bit about our guest. And you are going to want to stay for this. Her name is Marcy McCarthy. And okay, I know you're thinking to yourself, who is Marcy McCarthy? She is one of you. She was an observer in Georgia over the weekend. You know, they're recounting the ballots in Georgia. And boy, does she have some explosive information to share with you. Insider information of what was going on inside DeKalb County. I also spoke this weekend, so I spent a lot of time on the phone with her this weekend. Also to other people in Franklin County and throughout Georgia about what was going on there. You know, you've been seeing the president's tweets. Very important. The president's been tweeting about how the recount isn't working in Georgia, that if we don't audit the votes, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, that means comparing the signatures, it's basically worthless. And we'll talk to Marcy McCarthy about that, and you're going to want to hear what she has to say. It's very, very important. Now, I don't know about you, but security, especially cybersecurity, is very important to me. I was actually hacked by the Turkish cyber army. I wasn't the only one. A whole bunch of us at Fox were hacked, and that was on Twitter. But whenever I travel overseas, whenever I'm in the United States and I'm working on my computer from any location, even from home, I want a VPN. I want to be able to protect my computer. And so do you, because in our computers, we have everything that's personal, guys. Our bank accounts, our children's information, our medical information. I mean, basically our entire lives are in our phones and in our computers. So you're going to want to get ExpressVPN. I want you to hear this again. It is ExpressVPN, right? ExpressVPN encrypts 100% of all your data. It protects you against hackers and internet bad guys. ExpressVPN software, it takes just literally 1 minute to set up on your computer or your phone. You tap one button and then you're protected. I want you to think about that, because most of the time we avoid these things, right? You're like me, because you're like, okay, this is going to be way too complicated. I am not an IT expert. I don't know how to do this. This ExpressVPN, literally, it's one button. So why give these tech companies a free license to know everything about you? Remember, we've been talking about this forever, folks. Facebook, Twitter, all these social media platforms, Google, Sundar Pichai. Why are you going to let them know everything about you? If you have ExpressVPN, all you do is just shut them out. You shut them out and then turn around and you know what they do? They'll sell off your information. I want to tell you that too. Not only do they spy on you to sell your information. So it's time you take back your privacy at expressvpn.com/Sara. That's SARA. expressvpn.com/Sara. By visiting my special link, you'll get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN service for free. And who doesn't want to save money, right? Again, that's expressvpn.com/Sara, expressvpn.com/Sara to protect your data today. Got through that. I want to protect my data. I feel like I live in a science fiction world where everything about my life, everything about our world is just upside down. We saw what happened during this election. We saw the great thing that happened. 73 million plus votes for President Donald Trump. 73 million plus votes. There is no Republican that can ever say they got that many votes. And now we know there is a battle. There is a battle being waged in the courts. There is a battle being waged throughout this nation in different states like Pennsylvania, Georgia. We got Marci McCarthy. I told you about her. She's coming on. She was an observer. She's a Republican observer that was in DeKalb County. And it was very contentious there. But she's going to tell you what was happening on the ground while they were observing the voter recount and all of the irregularities and all of the problems. And she's going to tell it to you straight. She's not going to over-exaggerate. She's not going to keep anything from you. She is going to tell it to you straight. What happened in Georgia and what is happening across this country and how divided we are. And now the Democrats are coming around and they're saying, hey, wait a minute, guess what? We want you to be kind now. We want to make friends. We want you to just let it all go, except that, the media's president-elect, Joe Biden, the media's president-elect, because remember, no states have certified this yet. And by the way, if you guys hear any snorting in the background, that is not me. That is my Chihuahua. Well, it's my brother-in-law's Chihuahua, and I'm actually taking care of her. She's here with me, sitting here, just hanging out with me and snorting quite a bit. Just thought I'd throw that out there for you because I know you're all going to hear it any minute now. But we're going to get back to business here, and this is about our nation. This is about saving our country and our nation. And I know a lot of you out there, Saturday, I was actually at the MAGA rally. It was amazing in Washington, D.C. I got out there early with my husband and my daughter, and I was just amongst the people, talking to everyone, trying to get a feel for what you all were feeling. And I was feeling the same way, frustrated. I wanted to show my support. I wanted to hear what Americans from across the country, and by the way, I met so many of you, people from Boston, people from Pennsylvania, from Pittsburgh, people from Texas, people from all over this country that came to Washington, D.C. to say, hey, this is bigger than President Trump. This is bigger than all of us. This is about the sanctity of our elections. This is about the future of our nation. What's going to happen here on out under a Biden presidency? Will he pack the courts? You know what? Vice President-elect, media President-elect Joe Biden, he hasn't told us what he's going to do. He's hinted at it. They want to pack the courts. They want to legislate through the courts. They have been doing this for some time now because they realize that is the Democrats, and I call them the socialist Democrats. These are not the Democrats that your father, grandfather, and, the blue-collar America remembers. This is not that Democrat. This is a whole new ball of wax, guys. This is a Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Representative Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Democrat. These are virtue signaling snowflakes and people that want to tell you how to live your life, and people who really do not believe in the American dream or in American exceptionalism. They believe that's so passé. They are globalists. And it doesn't even matter what age they are. It doesn't matter if they're just out of college or if they're 50 years old. They have bought hook, line, and sinker into the socialist ideology, and that's why we've seen our nation so divided. Used to be we could talk to one another. Democrat, Republican, we could come to some kind of common ground. We had a little bit of disagreements here and there on quite a few things. I mean, it's true. But we could always come to terms with one another. Remember those days when you could sit at the table with Uncle Joe or Aunt Sally? And oh my gosh, I remember those days. My family was split down the middle. We had people that were Democrats in our family, people that were Republican, conservative, liberal, but we could all talk to one another. And friends. There are friends now that we don't even talk to each other. Not because I don't want to, because they have totally walked away from our friendship, right? Because they hate Trump. They hate President Trump. They hate anyone who voted for President Trump. They are adamant that and this is 73 million Americans. So if there's one of you out there, by the way, one of you who is just listening to the Sara Carter Show and you're not conservative and maybe you're an independent or a liberal that voted for Joe Biden, I really want to know how you're okay with that, or if you are okay with that you could just exclude 73 million people, 73 million that voted for President Trump. The only way I feel you want to include them, and then I'm going to play you a clip here. that I want you to hear. The only way that I feel that you want to include them is if they give up everything that they have actually, or that we have actually believed in, right? All these years, the last 4 years. So I'm supposed to be okay with the fact that, the left, the Obama administration, along with, by the way, some conservatives that were there, right? Let's talk about James Comey and others who purport to be conservative, and General Hayden and all these other, rhinos, and people who came out of the closet and said, oh, we hate Trump. All of a sudden they like Trump. Now they hate him again. They're just flip-floppers. They're not loyal at all to their hearts, to their friends, to their beliefs. They just go wherever the political wind blows. They want us to be okay with the fact that they weaponized the FBI, that they weaponized the CIA, that they weaponized the DOJ and the State Department. That's okay. We are not okay with that. I'm not okay with that no matter who's in office. I'm not okay with the fact that there's so much evidence piling up. I mean, okay, even if it's circumstantial, it needs to be investigated regarding Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, and the media president-elect, Joe Biden, regarding China and Ukraine, that I am stunned. If the media, if the New York Times or the Washington Post even had a little inkling of information like that on President Trump or on Don Jr. or Eric Trump or anybody else in the Trump family, even if it was a third cousin, they would have been writing about that for months. Remember when the New York Times and all of them won the Pulitzers for basically lying about President Trump? You guys, don't fall for it. Don't be so exhausted that they can gaslight you. Don't forget, we have Marcy McCarthy coming up. She is going to fill us in on everything that's happening in Georgia. And I also have some really important clips that I want to share with you. And this is regarding our election integrity and what's going on in the fight to ensure that every legal vote counts. But this pandemic didn't just test our country's endurance, folks. It exposed how living an unhealthy lifestyle can really increase your risk. That's why I recommend Field of Greens by Brickhouse Nutrition every single day. I mean, our family takes it. I can tell you that my stepson, Justin, thinks it's the best thing he's ever taken. He takes it literally every single day since I've had it at the house. I've taken it. It tastes delicious. While other health products boast about one vegetable, Field of Greens, listen to this, is packed with 18 clinically researched essential fruits and vegetables, plus green tea, ginger, turmeric, and beets. This powerful combination not only can support your heart health, it actually supports a healthy immune system, metabolism, blood pressure, and digestion. Field of Greens is loaded with antioxidants, pre- and probiotics. Just put 1 scoop in a glass of water, you stir, and you are done. Go to BrickHouseSarah.com and get 15% off your first order with the promo code Carter. That's CARTER. That's BrickHouseSarah.com. Promo code Carter. Available in 2 flavors. Both are great. You can trust me on that. Brickhouse, Field of Greens, guys. There is a Democrat, though, that I do appreciate, and it's actually Bill Maher. And I know a lot of you are probably like, what? Look, everybody is allowed to think differently. We are all allowed that right. This is America. But, Bill Maher calls out all the time. He calls out Democrats all the time. But here is my good friend and a guest that's been on the show many, many times, Jenna Ellis, who is now on the president's team. She's actually a lawyer. She's going to be defending him along with Sidney Powell. I have a clip of her coming up, too, along with Sidney Powell in their fight to show, basically, and to expose what happened here during this election. They want to ensure that every legal vote counts. Every legal vote counts. I'm reiterating that because that is the most important part of this. Do not allow the left to gaslight you. While you're sitting at home, while you're thinking about what happened here, while I know you are exhausted as I am tired. But every day I get up and I fight for my country because I actually believe and have hope that this nation will overcome all of this insanity. And we will overcome the enemies that are within because believe me, We have enemies within our country. They are like a Trojan horse. They are like a virus that is multiplying in this country of ideas. You do not win that in battle. That's why you don't see Republicans out there beating each other in the middle of the streets. It's always the left, right? We see these anti-fascist so-called groups out there like Antifa, BLM, and I'm talking about the Black Lives Matter organization, not the fact that Black Lives Matter, because actually Black lives do matter. They do. Everybody's life matters. But the Black Lives Matter organization that is very anti-American and was very obvious about that on their website. I'm not even making that up. I want to take a moment, though. I want you to hear Jenna Ellis with Bill Maher on HBO, Real Time with Bill Maher. I want you to hear how she gets him back with his questions on media's vice president, President-elect Joe Biden.
Why do you think so many people on the right, including people like Rupert Murdoch, Karl Rove, Erdogan, the strongman of Turkey, the Pope, China now, congratulated Biden? Why have so many people come over to this idea that, okay, America had a free and fair election, we're congratulating the new guy, that's the way it works, you win some, you'll lose some? Why?
Well, China is definitely congratulating Joe Biden because they know they can control him. Beijing Biden is something that actually really needs to be looked into.
Well, I walked right into that one, didn't I?
Question.
All right, well.
Yeah, you really did.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Jenna, you got me
So China
there.
congratulating Biden is not a really good thing. But
right.
We have always had contested elections through the legal channels, through the recounts. And just because we have the Pope or somebody on media who is congratulating Joe Biden, no states have yet certified their results. And that's all that we're asking, is to make sure that the results that are certified are the legitimate count.
It's true. Bill Maher walked right into that one. I mean, Jenna Ellis, of course, she was ready for it. But you know what? Think about this, folks. Bill Maher or anybody else out there, I don't care if you're a liberal or an independent or a Republican, anybody who sees, who just looks at the pile of evidence that connects Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden to China knows, absolutely knows, that there is a problem there. It doesn't matter. You can't ignore it. And it's going to haunt, media, President-elect Biden's presidency. If that's what happens, it will haunt it because it will come forward. And there are people out there like Glenn Greenwald, who is very liberal to an extent, but a real hawk on national security as far as telling it like it is and not afraid to hold people accountable, whether they are on the left or on the right, that's going to go after those stories. And there are going to be others like Matt Taibbi with Rolling Stones. And he's going to tell the truth. And there's going to be people like me. And there are going to be other folks who are very focused on getting the truth out to the American public. And that's what we need to be aware of. We need to find, support, and search out those journalists that are out there that are willing to tell the truth. Because what we have seen over the last 4 years is unheard of in the United States of America. And it is damaging our democracy. It's damaging all of us. It really is. We need to be able to hold our representatives accountable. But when the media is sold out to a political party and we are unable to get the truth out, it changes the whole dynamic. It makes it a fight, a battle, a war. And that is unacceptable. I want to play a clip here. And, Sidney Powell has been on the front lines of fighting and trying to expose all of the corruption in Washington, D.C. She truly has been a hero in the fight for Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. And, of course, everybody knows his story. She's been on this show many times. I want you to hear. She's the lead attorney right now, fighting with Rudy Giuliani and Jenna Ellis for President Trump to ensure that every legal vote counts. And then I'm going to go from her and I'm going to bring Marcy McCarthy on. You guys won't want to miss it.
It's massive criminal voter fraud writ large across at least 29 states. It could have been happening. Anytime a voting machine was connected to the internet, and we have evidence that many were, it was obviously happening. It's obvious from the algorithm and the statistics that our experts are tracking out for batches of votes and when the curves changed. And it's going to blow the mind of everyone in this country when we get it all together and can explain it with the affidavits and the experts that have come forward.
She's absolutely right. I have been warned about this, and it's a very difficult thing to prove. But in action, they can actually see these algorithms. And there are a lot of sources out there, some of whom I've spoken to personally, who have actually witnessed and actually believe, they've alleged, they have evidence of this. I've seen some of the documentation, but I am not an IT expert. But you can actually see shifts and changes in votes. Why is the American voting system hooked up to the internet and susceptible to hacking? A Princeton professor, it's out there, the video's out there, and he's done interviews, showed how easy it was to hack Dominion voting systems. There have been so many problems with these systems. All you have to look at what happened in Texas. Texas refused to use them. And this is the reason why Sydney and her team are adamant about getting the truth out to the American people. We need to know that there was election integrity. We need to have that, or we cannot accept what happened in this election. And if we find out, and if what she's saying is true, I'm saying if what she is saying, what Sidney Powell is saying is true, and I believe she absolutely believes this. She is looking at the evidence. Sydney's not one to lie, ever. She is about as honest as they come. I know her. I've known her for years. She's an amazing human being. And if she can prove this to the American people, boy, do we have a problem on our hands. Do we have a problem on our hands? Before I get to Marcy, I want to talk to you about something I feel really good about. And this is great news right now. You all know that I have this wonderful adopted cat named Barry. Well, Arm & Hammer has this new campaign. It's called the Perfectly Imperfect campaign to help lovable but overlooked shelter cats find caring forever homes, just like Barry. So everyone knows the benefits of adopting a cat. These cats are in particular need of love, attention, and support. From now until November 30th, shelters and cat lovers can nominate a perfectly imperfect feline friend on FelineGenerousStories.com. It's a fun way to help cats find caring pet parents through shelters. 3 shelters will actually win $10,000 each. Plus, Arm & Hammer is awarding a $100 3 shelters will win $10,000 each. Plus, Arm & Hammer is awarding $100 worth of litter to the first 100 eligible entrants. Visit FelineGenerousStories.com for official rules and to learn more. That's FelineGenerousStories.com for official rules and to learn more. Without any further delay, I'm going to bring Marcy McCarthy on. She has volunteered her time. She was an observer in DeKalb County, Georgia. She can really fill you in on the details of what happened, what she observed. Now, she is not an expert in Dominion voting systems. That is a completely different story. What Marcy McCarthy is going to be able to share with you is what happened to her on the ground while she was observing, watching the counters recount the votes in Georgia. It's the same issue that President Trump has been so upset about. He just keeps saying, forget it. I don't want this recount. It's a waste of time. I want an audit. So welcome, Marcy. Thank you for being on the Sara Carter Show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sara, so much for having me today.
Thank you for being such a superhero and getting out there and volunteering your time and really putting your money, where your mouth is and protecting the integrity of this election. First, I'd like you to tell people a little bit about yourself and what you were doing this weekend in DeKalb County.
So I was one of many folks from the Georgia GOP, specifically in DeKalb County, that volunteered to observe the recount that was taking place in 159 different counties across Georgia. So my role as a party monitor was to observe the ballot counters on the floor, observing them counting the ballots. So to my disappointment, it really, in short, as I told you before, it is recount theater.
Let me explain to people real quickly, and then I'm going to have you explain recount theater. I mean, Marcy, list out so that people understand while they're at home. You can't imagine what she went through. I mean, this is crazy stuff here. She was supposed to be observing the recount inside, and describe the building, please. Tell everyone out there who's listening what you told me over the weekend, how big these warehouses were, how it was hard to hear one another, how you had your masks on, how you were standing 6 feet away. Explain the environment so that all of you out there who are wondering what everyone's screaming about with regard to the Georgia recount, Marcy can tell you what it was and what happened there.
So the location in DeKalb County that was designated was in Lithonia Stonecrest, Georgia. And it was a big warehouse type of building in that the ceilings were several feet tall. It felt like you were truly in an industrial area. So there was white lights on the ceiling. There was no insulation. The acoustics were just very terrible to begin with. But that's okay. I mean, you need the space to set up the operations, and that's not really so much the issue. But the issue is basically due to COVID, we were required to stand at a minimum of 6 feet away from the table. Everybody had medical level masks on, and a lot of people, including myself, had a vanity type of mask over the medical mask. Now, the font on the ballot is extremely small, so we could not read lips. We could not see the papers. We could not ask the ballot counters any types of questions. We had to facilitate those to a supervisor if we didn't understand what was taking place in front of us. So really, as a monitor and observer, we were watching people just move paper across the table and at face value having to assume that they were putting a Trump ballot in a Trump pile and a Biden ballot in a Biden pile and a Jorgensen ballot in a Jorgensen pile.
You couldn't see anything. So, I mean, in all sense, the whole reason for you to be there was to observe and ensure election integrity. But you and the others, observers who were there, could not see what was going on. Talk a little bit about the counters so that people understand who the counters are, what they're doing, how they're designated, and what was going on with that.
So the ballot counters are employees or temporary employees of the county elections office in which they are hired to do the ballot counting for. At the end of the day, there was limited training on their part. So there was some confusion on there and actually how to handle the ballots, where they were holding them in multiple piles, which was not allowed. You only could touch one ballot at a time, and you had to repeat what was on the ballot to the other person and then put it in the appropriate pile. But again, as an observer, I was too far away and could not see what was actually on the ballot. In addition to, I had a responsibility to watch several tables that were happening or working in concert at the same time. So if I was watching, let's say, a ballot counter count up the 10 ballots to go in the 10 pile and then flip the piles for another 10, eventually getting to 100, I could not really observe the other tables because I was counting along with them. And I did notice in a couple of instances that they overcounted or undercounted the ballot. And I did call that out to the supervisor, and they did go back and correct the pile.
Maybe you can explain it to me so I can understand a little bit too.
Sure.
Because once the pile is done, once they've already done that, then it goes where? Because if they undercount or they overcount, is that kind of like the final count?
So let me take a step back first. Okay, there's about 45 or 50 tables that were set up in this warehouse. The ballot counters themselves were not socially distanced. Everybody was masked. So we were required to be socially distanced, but they were sitting across from each other, probably about, it's a card table. So it maybe at best it's 2 feet across, 3 feet across. And so there was definitely not a 6 feet spread between the ballot counters themselves. So that was an issue. But they were working in pairs. They were required to work in pairs. On occasion, I did see them certainly working independently, but that was called out to the supervisor and quickly corrected. So the ballot boxes come out of the back of the warehouse, and they are cardboard boxes that have a piece of paper on them and in a Sharpie written in a Sharpie, a number for the carton. And the content of the box or the box itself is sealed. And then there's a group of them that will unseal the box together, and they pull out the contents of the box. There's an envelope inside that explains the contents of the box. That was never read to us as a monitor or observer, nor the information, the piece of paper was ever shared with any observers.
So had these boxes been counted before, or had these boxes not been counted?
You had no way of knowing. You had no way of knowing. So you did not know the inventory, whether the box was worked on in any other capacity in a prior shift. You knew nothing about the ballot box that was put on that table for the ballot counter pair to work on together.
So you know nothing about what's going on inside the ballot boxes. No, they don't share that piece of paper with you.
Nope. Correct. There's no readout saying there's 1,700 ballots in this box. And this box was worked on a prior shift from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m., and it was not able to be completed, so we are starting the recount of this particular box again. There was no information whatsoever shared. You just sort of saw a box appear unsealed, and then they started pulling out the ballots out of the box. Now, the first task of the ballot counters were to sort the ballots. So they had various piles there, they had various signage on the table indicating. So they had a Trump sign, they had a Biden sign, they had a Jorgensen sign, an over ballot or over count, or vote, I should say, and no vote at all. So they could sort the ballots based on what was on the ballot. Now, again, due to the ballot receipt, which is a great feature of the brand new voting systems that we have in Georgia, where we have a paper ballot that comes out of the machine enabling this actual recount, but the font is very small on that piece of paper. And with the naked eye, even, 6 feet away, you really there's no way to see what's at all on the paper. And there's no way to really hear them because of the acoustics of the room. And you're watching multiple people at the same time.
So they didn't even have maybe a big screen, right, that showed where you could maybe rewind it and look at it again or see what was going on. They had nothing there for you to observe.
No, they did not. And that's a whole different part of the equation. So when they completed the recount, the manual recount, they all had these tally sheets associated with each of the boxes. They were handwritten in red ink. Now, when that part of the process came, there were 2 people that were asked to be put in the middle of the floor, but they were on a very small screened laptop to do the upload. So what I requested was, can we have this on a big monitor where all the observers can see and verify that someone is keying the right information? This is purely data entry at this point. So you're taking handwritten paper, and I can tell you the handwriting from what I could see from my 6 feet distance was pretty atrocious, and it just tallies. And now this person has to key the data in. There's one person doing the keying and looking at the tally sheet, and there's no verification of what's being put into the system that's being uploaded to the Secretary of State's office. So there's no oversight from the tally sheet to what is being physically keyed into the system.
That's absolutely incredible.
Horrible.
This is the United States of America. We should have a system that should be much stronger and even with more human resources than what you're telling me right now. I mean, we just have to trust that they didn't get tired, didn't put in the wrong number, that it was the accurate number. I mean, there's no way of knowing after that gets put in, right? Unless there's an actual audit.
Well, what should have been done is a very large, flat panel monitor or multiple ones that could be put up where you could sit 6 feet away from the screens and each other. So everyone was carefully socially distanced. There was the capability. They did have a microphone system with speakers in the room, although it didn't work really well. But in that limited area, they could have brought us together. And they also had video cameras actually on, all surveillance cameras on everybody that was counting ballots to ensure, the integrity of what they were doing, although you couldn't see what they were doing anyway. So it was really kind of the moot point. But they had the equipment potentially on site to do this. And what
but they didn't do it.
They did not do it. So what they could have done is, have somebody on a microphone reading the tally sheet to the keyboarding person, and for all to see. So if there were 650 votes given to Trump, then you would see that on the keyboard on the screen, being keyed on the screen. So we never had that opportunity for the verification. So we had to take everything at face value. That's why I call it recount theater. We were the props to make everyone feel better, and they were the actors doing the work and putting on the show.
I mean, this is really unheard of. And I want to talk about all of the players inside and what's going on. So all of you out there that are listening to Marcy right now, I bet you're as surprised as I was when I talked to her this weekend. That's why I asked about, a big screen television, because Marcy brought that up. I mean, we're living in a time of technology. She brought that up this weekend. I was thinking, well, why not? Why not? So we can ensure the integrity of the election. But now there were also some issues, Marcy, right? With even the counters, they're supposed to be the nonpartisan or the independents, and then the Republican and the Democrats. You're supposed to know who all of these players are, kind of, but you're saying that it wasn't always that way, right?
Well, the party monitors were all given credentials, basically a sticker that was either what indicated what our role was, and it had a blue sticker for Democrats, and then there was a red sticker for Republicans. So we could be identified in terms of what your role was and everything like that. We did have yesterday morning, which was Sunday morning, the ACLU show up as independent observers on their own merit, and some other counties had the Carter Center come as well. But particularly in Cobb County, it was brought to my attention that there were 2 ballot counter workers dressed in Black Lives Matter clothing during their shift. And we have photographic evidence of that. And that is great concern. Now, Black Lives Matter, as we all know, is a movement, but they are a democratic movement. And this is supposed to be an independent ground or place where everyone's supposed to feel that there's integrity, visibility. And when you have 2 ballot counters dressed in Black Lives Matter clothing, that is, in my book, political clothing. And if we showed up in any kind of Make America Great Again, because that's a movement as well, we would have been taken away from the premises and asked to change clothing. And certainly a county election worker that is responsible for counting ballots, and you're supposed to take them at face value for the work in which they're doing, their political preferences being worn in broad daylight on their T-shirt.
Well, absolutely. And I'm sure that not only that, you immediately know the political leanings of the folks around you when they're actually wearing those T-shirts. Was there any time that you actually felt intimidated, that other people felt intimidated being in the warehouse with the vote counters at all?
Yeah, there was a few instances of that. So first and foremost, on my unexpected Saturday evening shift, because it was decided at the 11th hour, truly about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, that they were going to add a third shift that started at 5 p.m. and we needed Republican observers, and that was relayed to them in a very ad hoc kind of way. So we did not have a scheduled group of people to come in, but we called out the cavalry, and we did certainly become out. We were able to get 5 people on very short notice on a Saturday evening, including myself, to come in to the DeKalb County counting facility. But at the end of the day, the communications between all of us was not very good. So I did not know. I was not allowed to really ask them a question, and I did, and that didn't get really a big issue, but there was a pair of elderly ballot counters that seemed to be temporary workers. They seemed to be struggling quite a bit, with what their tasks at hand. So there's a process that they are allowed to ask a question, and they hold up a pink question mark sign. But they had turned around and saw me, and they didn't know the designations of what we were, that they just saw me with credentials on and did not know I was a Republican Party monitor. So they started asking me a question, and I went to go answer that. And I was trying to tell them I was not a supervisor. I'm a party monitor. And the party monitor head of the Democrats came over and really started chewing out and violated the 6 feet rule of actually being in my space. So I let him know that he was violating my social distancing space, and he could not speak to me in such a manner. So then the supervisor, and he walked off, and then the supervisor came up to me and asked what the problem was. And I said, this couple was trying to ask me a question that your job, but they had a question for you, not me, but they did not know what I was. And this individual violated my social distancing space and spoke to me in a very aggressive manner, which I was greatly offended by. This following day, the ballot counters resented us being there. I mean, that was very clear. And there were more observers on both sides of the aisle, but we're wearing red badges, and they see us as the enemy. So,
well, it was like an enemy situation. You guys were like in a face-off inside the warehouse with ballot counters, and you couldn't even see the ballots being counted. So you're just you're standing there trying to do your best, and basically it's like one against the other almost. I mean, the feeling that I'm getting from this is that, I really can't believe this is the recount situation that all the counties in Georgia were in, but you weren't the only person I talked to. There were a number of people that I've spoken to that have said the exact same thing, if not worse, happened where they were at observing the recount.
It was very tense. It was very contentious. And at the end of the day, Sara, it was a waste of our time and our taxpayer dollars. What we really need to be doing is looking at the signatures of the ballots or the absentee envelopes. Now, I know for a fact that the ballots and the envelopes are separated after the ballot is accepted into the system. But we should be doing a verification.
Explain why that is so important, because I want you all to understand before Marcy gets off this call with me. I want you to understand why it's so important for the counters, for it to be audited, the envelope and the ballot. Explain.
Let me give you an example that verifies how I know that the ballots and the envelopes are separated after the ballot is accepted. And I'm speaking about absentee ballots specifically.
Right.
So I was a part of the voter review panel in DeKalb County this summer. When a ballot is taken in and sent in, they're supposed to verify the signature. They're supposed to verify many aspects of that absentee ballot envelope. Also, they're supposed to verify that they have the correct ballot enclosed. It is my understanding that this is a common problem. Some people put the wrong absentee ballot into a current day envelope and then send it in, and it's the wrong ballot. So downstream, after this ballot was accepted into the DeKalb County of Elections, I was asked to determine the voter intent of these ballots. And this is when there's an inability for a ballot to be completely read accurately by a scanner. It can be something as an extra mark, called a hesitation mark on there, all the way to not, filling in the bubbles properly, to people eating on their ballots, cutting their ballots, having art projects with their ballots. It's a whole big mess. But there's a whole process called the voter review panel where we, as a neutral panel of neutral folks, Republican, Democrat, and in DeKalb County, we had two nonpartisans that were affiliated with the Women's League of Voters, who
Correct.
are also really Democrats, doing this review process. So in our review session, we came across two different ballots that had to be adjudicated. Both of them turned out to be from the presidential primary that was held this summer. So if they're truly validating the envelopes and the authenticity of these ballots at the time that they are sent into the county elections office, how did a voter review panel get 2 ballots in the same batch from the wrong election? So what happens is, because that, I don't know. What it's supposed to have happen if they catch that is to call the voter and say, hey, you've sent us the wrong ballot. You still have this many days to submit a new ballot. Would you like us to send you a new one? There's a whole process, and it's fairly common for people to do this. But it's caught at the time when the envelope and the ballot are together at the point of entry into the county elections office. It's part of the authentication process. And that should be 100% accurate. There should not be 2 ballots in the same pile that make it all the way through the supply chain and attempted to go through the scanner to be scanned. Well, it couldn't be read, right? Because it's the wrong ballot. So it had no ability to do any kind of recognition capabilities to do any kind of analysis of what the ballot or the voter intent was. So that's how it ends up on the voter review panel's table. So how would this affect the overall integrity
of the election? When you think about this and how does that, matching those up, how, if they're not matched up, what could actually happen when people talk about possible fraud in an election? What can happen, and how could that be discovered? Through matching the envelope to the ballot.
Well, in this particular case, because the voter could not be contacted because the envelope and ballot were separated, the votes were kicked out and spoiled. So when the voter logged into our MVP system, which is our online system that allows us to verify if our vote has been accepted, you don't see who you voted for, but just your status of your absentee ballot, basically, or your voter registration information. It's a very useful platform. But those 2 voters had no way of knowing that their ballots were not really counted because they had the wrong ballot. So the 2 ballots were actually tossed and not counted whatsoever because they were the wrong election. That's a very high number in a process that's supposed to be 100% accurate and you're supposed to trust. So that really verified, and they told me that at that time, there was nothing they could do because the envelope and the ballot were no longer a pair.
So basically, 2 people in DeKalb County thought that they voted in the election and never did, and will never know.
Correct.
That you know of from that batch, because other ones could have gone through,
correct.
Right?
The voter review panel is a manual process, and we do have the ability to make those corrections and adjustments and change the ballot to determine the voter intent. But they would never have known that because there was no ballot to determine voter intent because it was never the right ballot in the first place.
Right.
We should never have seen that ballot go that far down in the supply chain.
When people think about the envelope and the ballot in this recount, you call it recount theater, Marcy, what can be done, one, to ensure the integrity of the election, particularly in Georgia? And why do you need to audit the envelope with the ballot? For those of you out there that don't understand, and for all those people out there that have no idea what it takes because they've never volunteered, why is that important?
There's no way to reconstruct the ballot back to the envelope at this point in time. But there are things that I think that could be done to eliminate the concerns or validate and truly do an audit of what we're being asked to accept as Georgia residents. So first and foremost, they could take the number of envelopes that were there and cross-reference to the number of ballots that were accepted in to be counted into the scanners.
So this could determine, like, if there are a whole bunch of ballots without envelopes, that could be a sign,
Correct.
Right, that something was fishy.
Yes, because people have made claims that thousands of ballots were dropped off in the middle of the night, okay? Well, they have to have had an envelope to have gotten there because an absentee ballot has to have an envelope associated with it. So how many envelopes came in? They have to keep those compared to how many ballots were actually counted. Now, there's going to be envelopes that are going to be rejected because they don't have the right signature, which brings up a whole nother point. But it might be something wrong with the envelope, and that would not be counted. So you would not want to count an envelope that didn't have a ballot counted. There would be a rejection rate. In 2018, the rejection rate of the signatures was 3.5% of the number of ballots cast. In 2020, that went down to 0.5%. That was sent out by Georgia's GOP chairman, David Schaefer.
How does that go from over 3.5% down to 0.5? How does that happen? I mean, that's a huge discrepancy between 2018 to 2020 of rejection rates.
Well, either two conclusions is with the increased amount of voters, people's handwriting got a lot better, or the settings were set at a much lower threshold for the ballots to be just accepted. Now, this software exists in banks across America, across the world. So if you try to write a check that is not the correct signature on file with the bank, it's going to be rejected for fraud. And I've had that happen to me because our signatures kind of, on legal documents versus whatever kind of documents, they often will change. But there is a signature on file when you have your voter registration that signature is matched to. So the software isn't anything new or revolutionary. It's how you set the software. The only way you can get a rejection of the software is, or that 3% reduction in kickouts, is the threshold of the settings would have to have been lower.
Let me ask you this final question. What is it going to take right now for the citizens of Georgia and for the citizens of the United States to actually be satisfied that there was election integrity? I mean, what is it going to take right now? Does the governor have to do something? I mean, we hear the president, he's really pushing on this. What is it going to take to ensure election integrity?
Well, right now it's a legal process that's kind of underway, and for many people, including myself, we have nothing to base it upon or know what's happening next. But it really sounds like for many of us, we don't have faith in our election process. There's a lot of human error. There has the potential for fraud. And we basically overwhelmed a system that was never intended to have the volume of the absentee ballots. So the reality is, I hate to say it, but we're going to have to maybe do it over again or invalidate the election or use the Constitution to start having the Electoral College or Congress or their state representatives to pick our president. But that's something that, the Electoral College does based on that. But going down where the Constitution takes us, I think that's going to give us a lot of resolve and concern. Right. And it doesn't make me feel warm and fuzzy. I don't feel warm and fuzzy about this election. It's not because potentially President Trump lost a re-election. I've lost a lot of faith in the process and the integrity and the transparency. I can't believe the recount information when I couldn't see the ballot for myself, and I was there for more than 10 hours on site. And I couldn't tell you how many, part of our reporting process is how many Trump votes were there, how many Biden votes were there on my report. And I could not answer that question after being on site for 2 days over a course of 10 hours, how many votes, because I never could tell because they never showed us in any manner that was transparent. I'm not a mind reader. I don't have X-ray vision, and I don't have supersonic hearing.
Marcy, I am so grateful for you exposing what happened, telling us your story about what went on in DeKalb County, Georgia, and filling us in on something that I think every single one of us needs to pay attention to. We all have to be aware of what's happening in our country, and we cannot just accept what is going on. We really need election integrity, and the American people need to feel secure in this election. I mean, we are the beacon of light for the rest of the world. And, I'm sorry. I've heard people say, you know what? Banana Republic, we have no right to accuse anybody else of anything if we can't fix our system at home. Thank you, Marcy, so much for being on the Sara Carter Show. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Sara, for having me. It was a pleasure being with you today.
I feel like I learned so much. And today's interview with Marcy McCarthy, I mean, she is incredible. I felt like I was in the thick of it with her, that now I truly understand what was going on in Georgia, the reason why the Republicans are so upset. And like she said, folks, this isn't about whether or not Trump lost or won. It had nothing to do with President Trump. It has to do with election integrity. And she's saying, look, I can't, based on what I've done, being an observer, can't tell you that this election is all on the up and up or that everything was okay with it. She just can't tell you that. That's a problem. That worries me. This is why we need election reform. This is why we need it every single time something like this happens. And now it's going to the courts. I'm hoping that Sidney Powell and Jenna Ellis, two fabulous, fantastic attorneys, and Rudy Giuliani can do something, can expose what was going on here. God, I hope not. I hope Dominion Voting Systems is not that corruptible. I hope that what they're exposing does not make me lose faith in the American election and our system and the integrity of our system. But I tell you this, if the evidence that they have, some of which I have already seen, but if the evidence that they have is easily explainable, it reveals what happened in their words, that there was extraordinary fraud in this election. If that alleged fraud is proven to be true, oh boy, what's going to happen next? What are we going to do? Election reform is the only thing we can do. If they find out in these states that there's been allegedly all of these fake votes, if that's true, folks, are we going to have to redo the election in those states? Think about the implications of that. Think about it. This is frightening times. This is very frightening. I want you to think about that. And I want you to think about what we need to do as a nation to get back to where we were, to where we need to be, to being better, right? All of us. Anyways, thank you so much for being a part of the Sara Carter Show. I know you learned a lot. I know I sure did. Thank you, Marci McCarthy, for being a part of the show. Remember, this is the Sara Carter Show. If you enjoyed it and you enjoyed today's episode or any other episode, please give us a 5-star rating. Please give us a review. We review all of your reviews, whether you're on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Believe me, we care about what you have to say. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter at Sara Carter DC. And for everything else, just go to saracarter.com, read my stories, follow my links there. I'm telling you, we are all across the board, and especially Parler. I'm a big Parler fan right now, folks. You can find me on Parler at Sara Carter Official. Again, thank you for being a part of the show. Remember, here at the Sara Carter Show, we are taking the story back.
Hi, it's Dana Lash, host of The Dana Show. Every day, I'm here to keep you up to speed on the most important stories and info that you need to know in your very busy life. And if you're always on the go and you want to stay connected, just download our daily podcast and take it with you. It's a great way to get up to speed on what you need to know and what legacy media may not be telling you. Visit danaradio.com and click on the podcast link or subscribe at iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.